Hello and welcome to lesson 12 on living world, and this is the fifth one from the Amazon case study. How can we manage the rainforest sustainably at the local scale? So last lesson I explained what local was. Remember, that might be something like we talk about within Norfolk, for example, or maybe within Durham. Um, and the reason this is so important is it could be argued that whatever the government decides, a national government or international rules, a lot of the time, it's very often what people actually do at the local level that matters. And we see this in the UK. So, for example, we're often encouraged by the national government to recycle as much as possible. But of course, actually, in many ways, it's down to individual families, individual localities deciding how much they're going to recycle. And sometimes down to local government about, how many bins, how easy they make it for people to recycle. Same with public transport. It's something that the government's keen to encourage, but a lot of that will depend on how much it's used, how much local government decides to pay towards it. Quite simply, a lot of the time, how many buses, trains, etc. there are. And then these last two topical ones: avoiding littering, socially distancing. I thought I'd put those in just to remind us. It's a lot of the time it's down to individuals and their choices and what they decide to do. Um, People can make at the national level, they can make all sorts of statements, but at the end of the day, it's down to local people, and that's what makes the difference, or not. So there's four local measures. Now, one thing to say is that you do need to be aware of each of these four, because they could put these into an exam question. So what I mean by that is they could ask you what selective logging is, what stopping illegal logging is. So you just need to be aware what they are. Not a huge amount more than that, so that's really the thing to work on. Okay, so I'm going to go through each one. You'll notice that these are explained very briefly here, but then there's a little bit more coming up. So in short, selective logging is where we only allow mature trees to be chopped down. That's so that the younger trees can then grow up and take the place. If you chop down all trees, then it's very difficult for anything to grow back. And also avoiding logging any trees that aren't going to be sold. So sometimes it's easier just to try and cut the whole forest down. There's ways to do it with diggers and chainsaws and the like, but it's very, very wasteful when that's done. Stopping illegal logging, obviously that's a national thing as well as a local thing, but it's a local element too. If you're ever asked to explain that, you kind of end up repeating what it looks like, which is just making sure that illegal logging doesn't take place. Agroforestry, not simply clearing whole areas of forest away when planting crops. Remember, one of the biggest uses of the rainforest is to grow crops like soya beans, for example. And agroforestry is where you actually keep some of the trees in place, and what that does is it protects the soils and ensures that it's not complete deforestation. And then finally, replanting, exactly what it sounds like. I think the key to try and remember here is you don't just replant any old trees, you try to use seeds from the original forest. So this is what we mean by selective logging. You'll notice that the chaps on the left-hand side there are measuring that tree, and that's to make sure that it's old enough to be allowed to be cut down. When it is cut down, the younger trees will then grow up and take its place. Okay, so that's a more sustainable way of logging. On the right-hand side, you've noticed here, I mean, you might have mixed feelings about this, but this is where sometimes they use elephants to get the logs out, because when you do selective logging, you can't really get great big lorries into the forest, because remember, you've let a lot of the trees are still standing, so they're kind of in the way. So what they do is they use livestock. It varies obviously by country, to get the trees out that you need. Obviously, that's going to be more time consuming, so that's sometimes not always very popular. but certain woods, like mahogany, for example, are so valuable that it's still very profitable to do it that way. Stopping illegal logging, so I tried to pick out sort of some local examples. So the chap on the left there is labelling up in quite a basic way, but he's labelling up the logs there as being legally logged. Okay, we do have signs up on the right. I'm not sure how much difference they make. And then you've got police on the lower right-hand side doing their bit. Okay, so this is agroforestry. So you'll notice, have a good look at this picture, because so in the foreground you've got the crops being grown, and that's what we mean by the agro part, the agriculture. But then if you look in the distance and then on either side, you'll notice that there are still trees in place. This is not a traditional field, is it? This is not what you'd expect. If I said a field of crops, you wouldn't expect it to look like this. But remember, that soil is very vulnerable to the heavy rainfall. So if you take those trees away, the soil's simply going to wash away. So this is what we call sustainable, because it means that the land is going to survive much, much, much longer if you keep some of those trees in place to protect the surrounding soil from the very heavy rain that you get in the rainforest. Okay, and then finally, replanting. Millions of trees have been replanted on the edge of the Amazon rainforest. It's not all just simply a case of people chopping trees down, and there have been, some really quite a lot of money spent on trying to get replanting going. And in fact, the two men on the left-hand side were once illegal loggers, but now they've decided to do the right thing, and they're actually being paid here to collect seeds from the rainforest that hasn't been cut down, and then those seeds are then used to create saplings in nurseries, and then they're planted, as you can see on the right hand side. That is the Amazon rainforest on the right hand side. It's the Peruvian part. Okay, and then those, by using actual rainforest trees, not just one or two species, it does bring back a lot of the biodiversity that was originally lost. Okay, so help with questions. There's 5 questions, quite a lot to do. First one hopefully is fairly straightforward. It says a slogan. Just remember, it's just one sentence you need, but remember to aim at local people. Okay, trying to get them to look after the forest. Okay. If you get stuck, you can always just have a look. Have a look at online and type in, save the forest, something like that, and see what comes up. Okay, remember to aim it at local people or farmers. Question 2, explain why it might be difficult to persuade locals that selective logging is a good idea. Think about the extra cost involved in only picking out certain trees. Okay, and a lot of it's to do with time. So that's why in the hint here, imagine that you've bought something from the supermarket and it's a bit of cardboard, it's a bit of plastic. A lot of packaging is like that, particularly food packaging. And actually, it can take quite a long time to actually separate the two out, the plastic from the cardboard, because that's what you should do, of course. And then the plastic goes one way and the cardboard goes another. But sometimes people just think they haven't got the time and they end up just putting it in the bin. Question 3, well, I've answered that one. Okay, on slide 7. 4. So that's the big diagram at the top of the textbook page, the second one, and it's choose 2 or 3. You don't need to do all. It just says identify ways in which different activities help the natural environment. Okay. So, and I've given you, if you're stuck about how to start it, put the thing in. So in that case, selective logging, and then put helps the environment by, and then try and think of a way in which whatever it is you choose, in that case, selective logging helps the environment. Okay, protecting the soils, for example. And then for B, it says make a list of the goods being produced by this sustainable use of the forest. use the source. Yep. If you have a good look at that source, you can find things that can be taken from the forest. I won't tell you what they are. Go and have a look. They're definitely there. Okay. Remember, goods are physical things that you could touch if you wanted to and actually take away. And finally, question 5. We like this sort of thing in geography. Draw an annotated sketch. All right, to show what makes an eco-lodge sustainable. Okay, remember, an annotated sketch is one with arrows. You point to certain features on the photograph, or obviously you would have done a sketch, and then you explain them. Okay, so you notice I've put an arrow on it saying most trees not cut down, and then you would explain, just put a little bit to the end saying this helps protect the soil or something like that. Okay, have a look at what the lodge is made out of, for example. Think about why they've built a bridge from one lodge to the next rather than just having a footpath. Okay, think about the distance between the different lodges. It's clearly not like a huge tower block hotel. They're the sort of thing and that you need to think about. Okay. Right. So finally, I just want to give you a bit of a message. This is in terms of content, new content. Anyway, this is that's it now. We're going to start, and this is where we would normally stop on a normal year. Um, we will post some quizzes to help you revise, if you like, remember all the new words and examples. There's certainly been a lot to do. But I just wanted to say a really big well done for getting this far. We know it's not been easy. We know sometimes you have to really motivate yourself, and obviously you're working in ways that you're not used to, and you haven't got your friends to help you, and you can't just ask the teacher a question straight away. We know all of that. So we're really, really, really proud of your efforts and fantastic. And lastly, but not least, if we don't hear from you in the meantime, like I said, we will set some quizzes, but we're really looking forward to seeing you all again soon in September and getting back to normal school life. Okay.